Because on this chessboard, checkmate is not where the game ends.
And in this game, this very chessboard gave us all the answers and even spoiled the entire storyline of Genshin Impact. Now all of this chess talk began since the first time a gnosis was revealed to us, and it looked oddly similar to a chess piece. Come Liyue, the gnosis was revealed and it too looked like a chess piece. But all these weird chess references only made sense 1.5 years later when they released the Harbinger trailer where we saw Pierrot playing chess with said Anemo and gnosis. But how could a chessboard shown for merely 10 seconds predict the entire upcoming storyline of Genshin Impact? Well, by now it has become common knowledge that the chessboard shown in the Harbinger trailer is literally the same as the famous man vs computer chess game between Garry Kasparov and Deep Blue back in 1996. This match was so revolutionary because it was the first time an AI beat a human. Both Kasparov and Deep Blue played a total of 6 matches, and the first match was the one Kasparov lost, and that is the one which is shown in the Harbinger trailer as well. Now given that Pierrot was on the black side like Kasparov, it would mean that the white side played by Deep Blue represents Celestia, which has all the gnosis. With all this in mind, let's take a look at the chessboard in game or game number 1 between Kasparov and Deep Blue. So the chessboard in the Fatui trailer shows this particular part of game number 1 between Kasparov and Deep Blue. Just like how the white knight took down the black pawn in game, the same move is enacted in the trailer as well. Now since it is shown that a Hellfire Moth is standing on the fallen pawn, it means that this pawn represents the Harbinger Signora and the white knight probably represents A, who took her down. One interesting thing to be noted is that in the Fatui chessboard we can also see a black pawn next to the gnosis, which is not seen in the original chess game between Kasparov and Deep Blue. Moreover, the black pawn is only seen at this particular shot and disappears in the other ones. So it could be possible that this rogue black pawn represents Scaramouche, who too was in Inazuma but then went AWOL after exchanging the traveler's life for the electro-gnosis. One more important thing to note is that the positions of the kings and the queens are interchanged in the Fatui chessboard. The black king and queen's positions and the white king and queen's positions have been exchanged in the Fatui chessboard as opposed to what is seen in the original one. Now, I am no chess wizard, but I'm pretty sure that this would change the outcome of the game entirely. But that's okay because like Pierrot said, in this chessboard, checkmate is not where the game ends. So it could be that this particular change of positions is done to show us the real important pieces, the queen and the rook, the Anemo and the gnosis. Which makes beautiful sense because the aim of the Fatui is to get the gnosis and not just to win some imaginary chess game against the heavens. Now since the gnosis are the most important pieces on the board, we could say that in a way the gnosis are in fact the kings of this chessboard. You all probably heard the lore Archon Ashikai theorize this already.
What if instead they are each their respective kings from their own chess sets?
But what I said before should be taken in a poetic sense and not a literal one. From the Fatui chessboard, it is clear that the Anemo gnosis is indeed the queen piece and the gnosis is the rook. But since they are the most important pieces to the Fatui, in this chessboard the gnosis are the kings, and only after capturing them can the Fatui win this game. So now a question arises: if game number 1 represents the scenarios in the nations of Mondstadt, Liyue and Inazuma, then where is the electro-gnosis? Is it the white knight that captured the black pawn? We all know that the electro-gnosis was never shown in Inazuma. Scaramouche, represented by the rogue black pawn, fled with the gnosis and only popped up with it later in the Sumeru Archon quest. Moreover, the gnosis was never possessed by A despite being the Electro Archon. So we can confirm that the white knight represents A as such, who took down Signora, the Fatui's black pawn. Now in the original game, Kasparov was defeated by Deep Blue. So even though the Fatui did get the 2 gnosis before, their plans in Inazuma were foiled and they even lost one of their precious harbingers. Celestia 1, Fatui 0. So if game number 1 represents Mondstadt, Liyue and Inazuma, then the subsequent games should represent the other regions. Game number 2, Sumeru, game number 3, Fontaine, game number 4, Natlan, game number 5, Khaenri'ah, and game number 6, Khaenri'ah. But before we move on to game number 2, a common doubt would be, what do the other chess pieces represent? While it may not be that important, since the black pawns are harbingers, the white pawns could simply be vision holders. A wild hint supporting this would be that just like how pawns have to make 6 moves to get promoted to a stronger piece, every character in Genshin has to get ascended 6 times and has 6 constellations as well. Yeah, but like I said, not very important. Moving on to game number 2 between Kasparov and Deep Blue, representing Sumeru. Now this is an especially interesting game because in this game, the most prominent figures are 2 bishops, one from each side. We can see how the bishops literally battle it out here, with the white bishop representing the Fatui taking down the black queen and ending the game as well. Now from the Sumeru Archon quest, it is clear how well the scenario of the chessboard played out. The ending battle was between 2 gnosis, the Electro and the gnosis, which have both been speculated to be bishop pieces. This is because the bishop piece is said to denote spirituality and knowledge, both of which is represented by the original gnosis holders Makoto and Rukadevata. What is even more interesting in this game is that this time one gnosis is on the side of the Fatui and the other on Celestia's side. Also, the Torre got hold of both the Electro and gnosis from Nahida, and since Karamus deleted himself from the Irminsul, it wouldn't be fair to say that this time the Fatui lost one Harbinger. Which would make it that the Fatui got both gnosis and won this round, and surely enough game number 2 was won by Kasparov as white against Deep Blue as black. Fatui won, Celestia won. Next up is game number 3 between Kasparov and Deep Blue, representing Fontaine. You all probably remember what happened in the Fontaine Archon quest. Focalors, the Hydro Archon, sacrifices herself in an unexpected twist, and the gnosis eventually ends up with the Fatui itself. Now Fontaine didn't really witness a conflict with the Fatui as seen in other nations, but both Focalors and the Fatui achieved their personal objectives. Focalors saved her people and the Fatui got what they came for, the Hydro Gnosis. Not only was there no conflict, but the Fatui even helps in saving Fontaine from the crisis. And surely enough, the game number 3 between Kasparov and Deep Blue ends in a draw. But the most interesting thing about this game is that when it ends, both sides have the same chess pieces remaining, which is 4 pawns, 1 rook and 1 king. This would definitely beg the question as to what piece the Hydro Gnosis could be, which I personally think could be a knight. And why is because it is one of the pieces that remains. Before I explain, yes, I do believe that all the Gnosis are part of a single chess set, but they have been playing different games, that is until the last one. Since the Anemo Gnosis is queen, Geo is rook, Electro and Dendro is bishop, the remaining pieces are 2 knights, 1 rook and 1 king. Leaving aside the king piece, which could be Celestia, only 2 knights and 1 rook remains. Now since Focalors sacrificed herself, I believe the Hydro Gnosis wouldn't be seen on the board at endgame. Also, since a rook remains on the board at endgame, the Hydro Gnosis could indeed be a knight piece. Adding to this, if one knight piece is Focalors, then the other knight piece in this particular game could be Furina, who also sacrificed herself to save Fontaine. Although Neuvillette plays a very pivotal role in the storyline, since he doesn't belong to either Celestia or Fatui, he probably doesn't belong on the board as well. And with that said, the third game ends in a draw. Next is game number 4 between Kasparov and Deep Blue, representing Natlan. Now since the Archon quest hasn't concluded, it would be quite tough to see how well the chessboard here enacts Natlan's scenario. However, I feel it could be very similar to what we just saw in Fontaine. From what we know, Natlan is also facing a crisis and is on the verge of destruction like Fontaine was. Even though the Pyro Archon clashed with Capitano, it seems that Capitano too wants to resolve the crisis in Natlan, just like Arlecchino did in Fontaine. And just like how Arlecchino tried to get the Gnosis from the Hydro Archon and failed, so did Capitano fail trying to get the gnosis from the Pyro Archon. And just like how the Fatui helped in saving Fontaine, we can see in the 5.1 trailer that the Fatui are also going against the Abyss in Natlan. Finally, just like how the Hydro Archon sacrificed herself to save Fontaine, it was made very clear in the 5.1 trailer that Natlan could only be saved by the Pyro Archon sacrifice. And to top this all off, just like game number 3, game number 4 between Kasparov and Deep Blue also ended in a draw. This gives me enough reason to think that the Pyro Gnosis could also be a night piece just like the Hydro Gnosis. Hell, I wouldn't even be surprised if the people of Natlan turned out to be dragons or ghosts, just like how all Fontainians were originally Oceanids. So I think, taking all of this into account, Natlan is going to be saved with the help of the Fatui, resulting in them also getting the Pyro Gnosis. Now on to game number 5 between Kasparov and Deep Blue, representing Snezhnaya. Personally, I feel this could be the most important of all 6 games. Why? Because all the previous games were played by the Fatui to get the respective gnosis, but by the time of game number 5 of Snezhnaya, the Fatui will have already acquired all 7 gnosis, which makes game number 5 all the more interesting. If the Fatui already has all the gnosis, then what is even the point of playing game number 5? Now, since I had already concluded that the Pyro and Hydro Gnosis are night pieces, that leaves the Cryo Gnosis to be a rook. A few minutes ago, I had also mentioned how I believe all the 7 Gnosis are part of a single chess set, but are all played in different games, save for the last one or game number 6. And if my guesses about the chess pieces are correct, then the 7 Gnosis do in fact make up one singular chess piece, which the Fatui could use in the final game against Celestia. But the problem is that they are missing the most important piece, the king. This made me wonder, what if we were entirely wrong about the king piece being Celestia? What if that king piece is actually someone else? And what if the purpose of playing game number 5 is to acquire that missing king piece? If that's the case, then who could be this king? It would only be fitting if the king was somebody involved in all previous games, constantly battling the Fatui, and wasn't that important until game number 5, because up until then, the Fatui's goal was only to capture the other Gnosis pieces and not the king. The only character fitting such a description would be the Traveler, who has constantly been at odds with the Fatui ever since game number 1. And I'm pretty sure you all must have noticed this, but the Traveler, despite being such a freak of nature, a wondrous creature with so much potential and power, never was a goal for the Fatui. In every nation so far, all they ever wanted was the Gnosis. But then why would the Fatui suddenly want the Traveler by the time of game number 5 or Snezhnaya? Because by the time of Snezhnaya, the Traveler will have resonated with all 7 elements, potentially getting back their original powers, thus becoming even more important than any singular Gnosis and worthy of becoming the king piece. If you think about it, the whole reason why the Traveler is even in this particular game in the first place is because of Celestia, or the unknown god. So if the Traveler is indeed the king piece, then that would make Celestia the player. Now game number 5 between Garry Kasparov and Deep Blue ends with Kasparov winning as the black side, which could hint that the Fatui successfully also acquires the king piece, the Traveler. This honestly doesn't seem like a reach at all, because both the Fatuis and the Traveler's interests align and have Celestia as their common enemy. It would only make sense for the Traveler to eventually side with the Fatui and take down Celestia once and for all. Finally, coming to the end of this video, we have game number 6 between Kasparov and Celestia, representing Khaenri'ah. Now this is the last and final game, the end of a very long war. Now the Fatui's chess pieces include Geo and Cryo Gnosis as the rooks, Electro and Dendro Gnosis as bishops, Pyro and Hydro Gnosis as knights, Animo Gnosis as the queen, and the Traveler as the king. Earlier I had also mentioned that the pawns could be vision holders, which makes me wonder if the characters shown in the Teyvat storyline teaser, that is Diluc, Ningguang, Ayaka, Lini Linet, Ian San and Pulcinella could be those pawns. Or maybe each pawn just represents the nation as a whole, willing to go against the heavens alongside the Fatui, and maybe this 8th pawn could even represent Tainslave. Either way, as expected, game number 6 between Kasparov and Deep Blue ends with Deep Blue spectacularly losing as the black side. I mean, you can see the board right here. This game wasn't nearly as competitive as the previous ones because most pieces still remain at endgame. So this could be hinting at how the Fatui, now with the powers of the 7 Gnosis and the Traveler, finally takes down Celestia in an overwhelming victory. And that, guys, is how a simple chess game predicted the entire storyline of Genshin Impact. Hey guys, hope you guys enjoyed that video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and do check out my other content as well, and I will see you the next time. Bye bye.